There was a course for kindergarten, so I took quickly that course too for 6 weeks, and I had the privilege to teach kindergarten for 3 summers, 3 months of summer. And then they asked me to teach in school, but not on Kuban. It was close to Rostov. I had to go by train. And I was there for a whole winter and had all kinds of experiences. They wanted me to teach anti-religion. I didn't want to do that. And so it was...
Were the communists really in control at this time?
Oh, yes.
They were in the government.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And so I didn't do it, and the next winter, then I came home for the summertime, and they wrote me a letter. They liked to have me back because they needed German teachers. It was a German settlement, exactly the one where my father was hiding. His relatives. And I said no, and we had a very good friend, dentist, a lady. She lived with us in Millerway in one of those houses. And she said to me, why don't you study dentistry? Then you don't have to. You just look into your mouth. And so I did. I went to Leningrad and studied, but it was with very much hardship. No, I should talk this more over later. And then in 1929, my father was working all this time not far away from our place. We bought a house in a big machine factory too.
In Cuba?
Yeah, Cuba. It's farm machinery, and Mr. Thiessen owned it. It was a very big Thiessen.
What was his first name?
Paul Thiessen, yeah. And then all of a sudden my father, because he was in the office, he got a list who will be sent away to Siberia, you know. Somehow
blacklist what the communists didn't like. They want to get rid of them and send them to Siberia.
And he saw this list.
And he saw this list. I don't know how he got the list, but he saw it and his name was on it too. So he said we had to get out here. And then he sent my brother Henry and I. We went to Moscow, and Henry was supposed to work or start looking ways how to get people or how to get out. And Dad and Mom, they would come then after. And so we were there for maybe a month. I started to work with the dentist.
In Moscow?
In Moscow, yeah. And Henry, and then there were 2 other boys, all the same 18-year-old boys. I was then already 22. So I cooked for those boys in the evenings, and in the daytime I worked for. And then they got some. They thought maybe there is a chance that we can get out. And he wrote home, and so Dad and Mom and all the rest of the children all came to Moscow too. And then we were there about 2 months up to Christmas. This was from maybe from September on.
September 1929?
29, yeah. And October, November, then maybe end of September, we were all together 3 months in Moscow. Then
where were you living then in Moscow?
Outside of Moscow, like that, the 2. Outside of Moscow there were villas, you know, from the Tsar's times yet. You know, these rich people, they had like villas outside of, and it was beautiful, nice big trees. What kind of?
It was in the forest.
Yeah, a real forest, evergreens, pine trees. It was beautiful. So all the Mennonites settled in those empty.
And all the refugees that
they always were abandoned.
You said this was winter time, and these were dachas, they called them, like for the summertime for the rich people. You know, they were
summer houses.
Yeah.
Summer houses. I see.
And
how far from Moscow would they have been?
About 20 miles. It was about 40 miles. I said yesterday, right. 40 miles in the radius. And we had an old lady lived in this house, I guess all winter too. And she was so good to us too. And we stayed in that house. And then all of a sudden, and my brother Henry, he was the Gruppenführer, they called him.
Leader.
A group leader. He would take lists of, other
Names on the
families,
list and want to pick up.
and all their names and everything, the ages and everything, and then bring it to that, what do you call it? Yeah, you should be always here.
So Henry would take the list of the families,
Yes.
and he would go to Moscow
Yeah,
to the authorities.
yeah, and see what he can do about it. And these other boys had lists too, their families too, and some others. So these 3 boys were something like leaders. The younger boys, they wouldn't arrest so easily. If men would come in,
The men were suspicious.
then they were
about
suspicious.
Do you know who helped Henry? Do you remember the names of the other boys or not?
Oh yes, one was a Billy File, and one was a Geert. What was his first name? I forgot now.
Sometimes they would get dressed up like Westerners, and that way the police didn't arrest them.
Yeah.
And then they got to the German embassy and could talk to them and tell them what pinch you had.
Yeah.
Oh, you would go to the German consul?
Yes.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden one night, a big van stood outside our house there, and the police came in and said, "Out, everybody, into these vans." And my mother was sick.
Deck.
Yeah.
Just deck truck.
Yeah, and we had to get out, and it was middle of the night, and it was snowing before.
This is still in Christmas, isn't it?
Yeah,
Close to
Christmas, yeah. And in Moscow it's cold.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was sick, and she cried, and she says, "I can't get out. I'm sick. I can't." Nothing doing. She had to get
We're
dressed.
carrying out.
Yeah, we carry
Very
it out.
polite, we
but we
carry
have
out.
so we quickly had to pack what we had, our things, and get into that truck. And then it took us to the station. It was mostly not really into the station where the trains
It was a
come.
small station on the sideline from Moscow to the north.
Yeah, a small station. So we all had to go out, and this was snowing, and we had all our belongings, and we were sitting there outside.
Waiting for a train? They were going to pick up a train?
Yes. And then all of a sudden a train came, all at night, everything at night.
A cattle train.
A cattle train came,
cars.
and it was
Freight
dirty
train is coal
inside.
cars. And they put the people in the coal cars.
How many people would have been at the station? Were there lots of people?
Oh yes, there were 40 people they put in one wagon.
In one coal
It
car.
was just like a herring. And then they had a little heater right in the middle. And there was a little child, they packed us in there, and away we went. And Henry and these 2 boys were with us too, because we lived with the Geertsens together in one house.
Oh, I see.
Send them back to Cuba where they came from.
Yeah, and so everybody was going to be sent back. And so the train went very slow. And when we were out of Moscow, a little ways already, these 3 boys jumped out. They heard that in 3 days, in 3 days, there will be some passports given, and maybe there's a chance that we could get out. And they heard about it.
And they had the...
So you were part of the big roundup that went on before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because yesterday you were mentioning this big roundup.
And they had a code. Andy said, if I phone home I'm coming, that means that you come to Moscow.
Yeah, wait, we're not quite there, Daddy. And so they jumped out and went back. And if they will be there, not caught in 3 days, then they can go to the consul and get the papers. So they were hiding in those 3 days. And we, instead of, it took just 3 days to go from Moscow to our place, to Cuba. But they took us 8 days.
You have to send you
All
different
around
route.
here to Kiev, over the Ukraine, made a big thing.
Big detour.
Yeah, a detour. And then the train would stop, and then it goes like this, and then it was...
Did you have any food?
No, we had to, when it stopped, we had to go out and find something. And so...
Where were we getting money from? Did you have...
We had some money.
Did you have it
You know,
hidden away or something?
I guess so. My dad must have. I don't know exactly.
You got that right free.
Yeah, and when we and then my dad and Henry had an arrangement made. If we come home and there is a telegram from him that I am coming, that means we're supposed to come. Then he has the papers. That
He
was-
had the pocket of passport, so
So when we came home after 8 days, there was a telegram already for a couple of days waiting for us. But now we didn't have enough money to buy tickets for everybody. And the police had all they were watching very careful now who was boarding the
nobody
train.
supposed to sell tickets to Moscow.
And there was not allowed to go to Moscow. And so we knew we had the papers now. We had the, and so my father said, all right, Henry is in Moscow, and you two girls, my sister Pauline, she was then 16, 17, and my brother was 18, and we were supposed to get out from, so father said, if you three get out from Russia, but it was a hard
Decision.
yeah. So he had enough money together for us two to buy tickets.
Tickets to Moscow.
And then when we came in the evening to the
To the
station, there were all kinds, even some spies from our own people. There was a Mr.
And we
Fast.
shot youth leader.
He used to be a youth leader, and now he was a spy for the communists.
What was
Maybe they made him.
Do you remember his first name?
I think George, I'm not quite sure. Fast was his name. And then when we came to the station, we took eine Pappe, okay, das wird vielleicht stören, wenn es da immer
Yeah,
zwischenspricht,
there
ja.
are 3 stations.
Yeah.
But
So,
it's compulsory.
yeah. So we looked up all the stations before Moscow. And we found a station not too far away, you know, outside. It had a different name, you know, not Moscow.
Moscow.
So,
They sold it.
so we said to the lady or a man, I don't remember, if we could have some tickets, just for Pauline and myself. Tickets up to that
Take it back to
station.
the station. And that lady said, no, it was Moscow.
And so we took the tickets and went. It was a night, and my father brought us down to the station. It was 3 miles away from us. And so we boarded the train, and then I said to my sister, don't you talk German? And so we tried to talk just Russian, so they wouldn't know that we are German. And then one time already, it took three days to go to Moscow. There were somebody came to sit beside us, and they asked where we were going and what else. And I had a friend in Moscow, and she told me that time before I was there, why don't you come here and start a kindergarten? They needed somebody to work in a kindergarten, because she knew I was for 3 years. So we said we might go to work in a kindergarten. We had to lie a little bit, but what can you do? Yeah, and maybe it would be, maybe we would have, if we couldn't get away. And Paulina, she was good in kindergarten too. So we came safe. Early in the morning, about 4 o'clock, we came to that station. It was dark, and we didn't know anybody. And
The Western at Moscow.
yeah, and that lady was the conductor. She was a lady. And then when we stopped there, I said, well, before that, I asked her if she could get some tickets to Moscow, because we want to really go to Moscow. And she didn't suspect anything, because we talked Russian. And because I went to high school, I didn't have an accent,
enough
you know.
money
And I said, here is $25
without change.
for my sister and for myself. And so she brought the tickets in, because she knew, and so quickly it didn't stop very long. At 5 o'clock we arrived in Moscow. And there was Tante Mia's father, Mr. Jacob Reimer. And he said, girls, where are you going to? don't show up on your old places because they're still looking. The police is all over there looking. Don't show up.
You just met him by accident?
Yeah, by accident. And I said, we want to go to America. He said, be careful, because you can be caught and you can be arrested. So we said, where shall we go? And there was another family, Jacob Martins. They had 5 or 6 children, and they lived 40 miles out of Moscow. And that far they didn't get them, all the people. So they were safe there. I mean, they were not sent back. And their children were all sick of measles. And he gave us the address to those people, and he said, you go down there and stay there. And then we started to look for our brother Henry. So in the daytime, we would go to this place where we used to live. It was right between Moscow. There's 40 miles and 20 miles right in between. So every day we would go down to this lady, the old lady. She was good to us, and ask if there was anybody, if Henry was there or anything, and we couldn't find him. And so we waited. And Henry, in that time, we didn't come. It took 8 days till we were home. And in that time,
Andy went to the Cuban.
He got on a train and went home with the tickets in his pocket.
His passport in his pocket.
And we were gone, so we missed each other. And when he came home at 10 o'clock at night, we had already, when we came back, they had some communists in our house. Papa went, okay. And made it will...
No, it's okay.
Yeah, can it be... And so we had to be careful. And he knocked at the door, that's the summer kitchen. And our parents were there. We just in the summer kitchen, 2 rooms we had there, dining room, summer kitchen. And so he knocked at the door, and my mother said, who is there? And he said, that's Henry, your son. And then she opened the door, Henry, you are here? How did you come get here? The girls are gone to Moscow. And he says, Mom, look here, I have all the papers. We can go to Canada, to America. But you have to pack now everything what you have, not so much, just what you can take in your hands. And then we have to go right away back and get the train and come to Moscow, because these tickets are worth just for 10 days. Then they are worthless. And they have...
and 7 days are gone already.
Yeah.
7 days were gone.
Yeah. So he says we have to go right away.
It took 3 days from Cuba to Moscow.
Yeah. And so my father went quickly. There was a Mr. Penner. He had nice horses, and they went from the backyard. There were fields. So they all went out there that way to the back.
The whole family?
Yeah, the whole family.
And they had to pack at night without waking up the other people in the house?
Yes, of course.
Where were the other people sleeping in the house?
In our bedroom, there were 2 bedrooms, and the living room, they took that, and the kitchen. And we were in the summer kitchen and a little dining room for the summer, like.
It was kind of in the back of the house?
Yeah, it was built on, like. So it was easy to get out there. And so they came and on these horses, and then they went all day over steps, prairie, you know,
They didn't have any
field ways.
Not along any road, though.
No, I don't know. And then we came to Armavir, that was about 100 miles away from us.
Very likely.
Yeah. And then they stopped there in the evening. You know, they went all day long on horses.
Was Mr. Penner along?
Yes, he was driving. He was driving, the horses. Yeah, they were his horses.
Which Mr. Penner was that?
I don't know his name too. Yeah. And so when they came out, you know, we weren't there. When they came out into the station, there were trains going. All of a sudden the police came. Are you Hepting? Yes. You are arrested. So they took Dad, and when Henry hit, but Dad had already the passes in his pocket, And when Henry heard it, he quickly ran to the other and under the trains and disappeared and hung onto a train which were going the way to Moscow. But they made arrangements, maybe in Rostov, somehow, I don't know. I don't know this exactly how
And Henry's still around, isn't he?
Yeah.
I should talk to him.
No, he died.
He died.
Oh yes. He
Well,
died.
but when Auntie Anne, remember? Tante Anne?
No, she was too young.
Yeah.
I was the oldest. And Tante Polina even said, why don't you write all this down, because I don't know exactly all these details. He wants me to do it because I was the oldest.
Okay, so Henry heard the police
Yeah, and he
walk up to your dad.
Yeah, and so he quickly disappeared. And they took Mom and my sister Elizabeth and Johnny and Annie. They put in a room and locked them up.
In the station.
Yeah, in the station. And so Dad had to go back. This was a little station before Armavir, past Armavir.
And what I said, Father, they took him to Armavir, the headquarters of the police.
To the headquarters. So they took him to the headquarters, and when they brought him into the headquarters, Dad showed the
police
papers.
were very proud. He brought somebody,
Yeah.
and that took his passport out to the head police and showed him that. And then the head police said to this officer, you Durak, that means you dump up. This man has to be out of Russia in 3 days, and you arrested him.
Yes, now they were scared already. Because
they went out in the station, they had the chief police, and he saw there was a steam engine, and the engineer was filling up water in the steam engine, and he told him, you take this to citizens to that station. And the engineer said, that's none of my business. I tell you have to take this station and set them up in that station.
Yeah.
Then he said,
So the police chief told this engineer that...
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So Dad had to come...
My father-in-law got on the train, on the steam engine.
And he came back to this station where Mom and the children were.
This little station, flyer trains never stopped in that station.
Yeah, it was...
Just the commuter trains.
So they put the whole family together again and took them to the Armavir, back to that big station where the flyer stopped. And the whole station cars.
My wife is sitting in that station, and they said the station agent had to phone my mother-in-law. The father's free, he can go. And then the station agent got a telegram and told my mother-in-law that is coming. I don't believe it.
And she was praying there on her knees all the time.
And when the agent came in, like he had to come into the locked room, eh?
Yeah.
And he said that they were coming.
He told her, and she couldn't believe it. She thought they were just fooling. But then Dad came too, and then they put them, and then they found all the trains were put together about 300 miles back in Pyatigorsk. That's a city.
The chief policeman, he had power, he could do such things, but he did it all on his own.
Yeah. So they found back to here, keep so many places for this family.
And then a flyer.
Yeah. And then they came, they could all get in, and they helped them to get in, and it was just beautiful. And then Dad gave a telegram to Rostov for Henry Hepting.
And the train and that can't be coming.
And so, and that telegram was, you have to ask for it, you know? This is how it was. And Henry was going around in Rostov and was so down, he didn't know what to do. And while he was going by the telegraph station, he heard his name all of a sudden, Hepting. And then he went there, he says, is there a telegram? Yes, here it is. We are coming with this train, and you come in that train too. He said then he went and had a good feast, because he couldn't eat and drink anything, he was so down. And then when they came, he got in, and then they came in Moscow at 5 o'clock in the morning, like we did before. And now where are the girls? And it was, and the evening at 9 o'clock was the train leaving.
Last turn.
Yeah, that was our turn then. If we didn't get on the train, then it was
you
over.
missed it.
Yeah. And this was 5 o'clock in the morning. So mother and the children stayed in a station there. It was a big station in Moscow.
Moscow had 10 big stations.
Yeah.
And mother stayed in the big station.
Yeah, and then Henry went to look on all these outside of Moscow, and my father went to this dentist where I was working, and we had some other friends, and he was all around in Moscow. He was looking for us. And then around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, all of a sudden we went again. Yeah, we went to that place where every day we went there, and we were there and nothing again. And then we were coming back to get the train again, to go back to our Martin's place. And there is Henry coming out from the train. And then he said, "Girls, where are you? I'm looking for hours for you already." And then he took us on both sides, and back we went on the train and to Moscow, to the station. And we came there at around 4 o'clock, and Daddy wasn't there yet. He was still looking for us. At 5 o'clock he came. And then we had our stuff, Pauline and I, we had our stuff all at the Martin's place, just 2 suitcases. But how should we get them from there? Otherwise we didn't have anything. So we hired a taxi, and then I went with the taxi and my father, and Henry went with the rest on a train. There was a train going 40 miles out where it was, where we had to go. And so
you had to get onto this train outside of Moscow.
Yeah, oh yes, yeah. So we went there and picked our stuff up, and we all came together there. We were quite...
Was the Martin's house close to this?
Yes.
It was close to the place where they were?
Yeah, it wasn't far away. And so then we looked, the train was all closed already, all the people inside. And they wouldn't, and the cashier had closed already.
The border.
They wouldn't give us any tickets. And so my father knocked, and he was drunk, that man was selling tickets. So my father pushed in some money. He says, "Here, you can have all this without change. Please give us tickets." Okay, he opened and started to stamp the tickets and gave us the tickets. Then our luggage they had some along, and we didn't know if we could take it in. But then they let us in. And then the train was almost to leave, and we didn't have time to go all the way, look where there was place. So the last train, there were not Mennonites, there came Lutherans out and Catholics, the German people.
The last car were Catholics.
Yeah, so we knocked at the door, "Please open." "Oh, it's full here. There's no room for here. Da ist nicht Raum," German. And then Dad said, "We won't stay. Just let us in before the train leaves. Afterwards we'll look for another place. We'll go farther up."
Go no other cars. The Mennonites are no other cars.
Yeah, they wouldn't let us. No, you're Mennonites. You go to your Mennonites. So.
How could they tell you were Mennonites?
Yes, I don't know.
I guess it's close.
So they opened the door and let us in. And then we stood, for a long time we stood in the aisles. But we're so glad we were alone. And I know it felt like now we're like saved, And
so you just got on just before the train was to leave.
Yeah. And the Gertzen family, they were not sent back. I don't think so. That Gertzen, that other boy what was with but the fire boy, he never came out. Oh, what was it? Because he was engaged and gave already a ring to that Gertzen's sister. And when we came to the border, from Russia, they said everything, we had 25 rubles left. My father, we had so many stuff people bought from us, but they didn't have money, and in that time when we were gone, he collected some money. People were over $8,000 what they owed us, but we never got everything. So then they said those $25 have to be stayed back, and if you find gold, and if they find gold on anybody, they send them back. And this Mr. Thiessen, the one that owned this big factory, Paul Thiessen, he asked my dad if he could take a bunch of little gold along. And then maybe someday he could help him with this gold, send it back somehow, the parcels or so. So Dad took it. And now Mother, and we came already closer to the border, and Mother and Father were standing in the aisles close to the washroom, and my father said, "Put it in here." And Mother said, "No," then they sent me back. And he said, "Go inside in the washroom and hide it somewhere on you." No, my mother said, "I won't hide it on me." Then they sent me back, and she wouldn't do it. And while they were arguing here or discussing it, all of a sudden the door goes open and there comes in police. And Mother has it in her hands, that little sack full of gold. And then they say, "Go in," they ordered them to go inside. And they passed by a newspaper basket. So Grandma Mom, my mother, she just let it drop in a newspaper basket. She thought, let them have it, but I don't want to have found on me. And they came in and had looked everything, but this Geertsen's girl, Ida Geerts, they took her engagement ring, and she cried so hard. Her family was along too. She didn't have a father, just a mother and children. And so when we came then across the border, it was like coming to heaven. We were so thankful. Everybody knelt down outside and thanked the Lord for saving us or bringing us out. And then they said, they came in, those, like I said yesterday, all those Red Cross nurses came in. Alle wohl auf? Ja. Gott sei Dank. And we didn't have heard this Gott sei Dank for a long time already. In Russian there was no Gott sei Dank. Praise the Lord. And so they brought us in some food, and they were so good. And then we had to get out, and then we had wonderful baths, to sterilize us. All our clothes had to be sterilized. They put it in ovens. It was like baked almost, because they didn't want any lice, and they didn't want any. And our hair was combed with a very fine comb. All of us girls, we had to be very careful, and so we were very cleaned up and had good food. And so we came then in a lager. How would you say it?
Camp.
A camp.
Refugee.
Yeah, and it was, first we came in a very big barn. It was nice and clean. There were no horses or no
there
cows.
There was nice and clean straw.
Yeah, and
in the stables.
And, where usually the cows stand, then there's
stalls,
they had nice straw, and each one of us got a nice blanket, wool blanket, gray ones. So we had some beddings along, but not for everybody. And so we could sleep on that straw. And so it took a couple of days till they had all names, and Henry had to bring all the lists, but some came along, some didn't. And so, and then we were transferred when we were cleaned up here, and even the German people did so much for us. We were put in a different place, a little farther. We had to go with the train again. And there it was nice and clean. It was mostly like a house. It was officer schools.
The old timers.
Yeah. And so it was nice and clean, and the food. And then they brought from whole Germany loads and carloads of clothes together. And then they had, for each family had to come, they went by the alphabet. Today, let's say that the H family had to come all, and they got dressed. The whole family, everything. And
both you and Grandpa at the camp at the same time?
No, he was there before us.
Different camps.
Yeah, and there were two camps. There was Hammerstein.
That was the first time I had something to accept.
Yeah.
I was usually all I have to give, not to accept.
Yeah. This was Hammerstein, and then we were transferred yet to Mölln, and he went to Prenzlau. That's a difference. So we never met there. There were 5,000 people came out.
Yeah, they were close to Hamburg, and that was close to Berlin.
Yeah.
North of Berlin.
Yeah, and then they gave us wonderful food. There was a big kitchen, and got dressed. And then Christmas came. This was just shortly before Christmas. And they had a big place, and they put up long tables, and you could look from the side and you could look straight. They had all over these little Christmas trees on the tables, and each family had their name on, where to, for the house father it was a Bible, and for the house mother material to sew something.
And a songbook.
Yeah, and for the whole family was something there. For the children, for the little ones, all kinds of what would you say, toys. And then we organized already a choir, and they sang in a choir right away too. And we had wonderful Christmas songs and Christmas. There were about 5,000, not maybe 5,000, maybe not quite so many here, because we were all together came 5,000, maybe 2,000 or 3,000.
Admiring us how we could sing.
Yeah, and this is how we celebrated Christmas. It was wonderful, and we all had presents and everything. And then we were there for 3 days.
In the summer.
Yeah, we were there for 3 months in Germany. And then they started to send them, then we had all of a sudden, Canada opened the doors. Yeah, but here's to here then. Yeah. Then all the families what were all healthy, nothing wrong with their
handicaps.
No handicaps, and the eyes had to be healthy, and the lungs and everything, no flecken on the lungs, no sign that they had been TB or anything. So we were the lucky ones. We could go to Canada. Our whole family was healthy.
No Russian blood.
Yeah, and in those 3 months, they started to. There was once a month or once a week, would the dentist come from Hamburg, work among the refugees. A doctor would come all the time, and so they asked whoever could help something. So I said I could help in the dentistry, and so I helped all the time there to pull teeth even. One time the dentist had here was a lady, Mrs. Klassen, Herman Klassen. They died here, and she had here all the teeth had to be taken out, and then this doctor said, "Fräulein Hepting, you can take this."
Miss Hepting, you can take it.
So he gave me the forceps, and I took them all out, and some others ones too. And later on here in Yarrow, all of a sudden this lady came to me. They came later when we came to Yarrow. She said, "Do you remember me?" I said, "You look familiar." She says, "You pulled all my teeth, don't you remember?" Yeah. And so we came, and my father knew about Yarrow in Russian, because our neighbors from the backyard were Friesens, and Mr. Friesen's wife and Mr. Dirksen's wife here in Yarrow were sisters, and Mr. Dirksen was the storekeeper here, the first storekeeper. So Mr. Dirksen would write letters to Mr. Friesen about Yarrow.
What were the first names?
John
Dirksen.
John Dirksen and John Friesen. No, Heinrich Friesen. Heinrich Friesen. He is the father of Franz Friesen from Morden. He's a minister, Franz Friesen. And so they wrote about how nice it is here. The climate is so nice, like we used to on Cuba, and there was a nice climate too. And so we always, then my father and our neighbor, Mr. Leonard Ewart, he had, Mr. Ewart studied in Germany for 10 years, and he had all kinds of encyclopedias. So on Sundays, Mr. Ewart and my father would study about British Columbia, read everything, what the people are doing here, and what kind of climate, and what are the working conditions, and what they can live from farms and so. And so we wanted to go to Yarrow right from to British Columbia, right from the beginning. And we arrived in Winnipeg, and the fairs, Cornelius the fairs, they took us in, and we were there for 3 days at their place. And then they started to look for work for us. We girls, 3 girls of us, we were already. Now they put us in that book, the Mädchenheim. And my father and Henry were supposed to work on one farm. My mother and the rest of the children were supposed to live in Morden, and it was all so far apart. So my mother said, "No, I don't like this. We came together out, and now we're supposed to be torn apart here in Canada." And then Mr. Wilhelm Dick, because he knew us from Russia, he came to the fairs. He was the father-in-law to Mr. de Fair. And he said, "You know, Brother Hepting, if you really," and my father talked about BC, "if you like to go to BC, why don't you go now? The CPR will pay your like they paid you know, they will pay your travel expenses. And then why don't you go?" And our luggage was still packed with everything. "Why don't you go straight to BC?" And we stayed just for 3 days, had a little snow, saw a little snow and saw a little mud there. It was in March, and in April. And then we arrived on 11th of April, 1930 in Yarrow.
Right in Yarrow.
Right in Yarrow. We had some friends already, like the Dirksons. And then we had some Peters, Elsie Peters' father. I don't know if you know them. And Pete Peters, he's married to Andy Rempel's sister, and Walfred Rempel, you know, Lenny, to her, to his sister.
Klassen.
Yeah, Walfred. And so they came, picked us up in IBC, and we lived happily ever after. Almost that fast.
Well, I better go now.
Yeah.
Okay, we're continuing to record with Grandpa and Grandma Rempel. And we're talking a bit about Grandpa's childhood when you were growing up, and your schooling and so on.
My first childhood?
Your first childhood, yes.
A sense of humor there.
Right.
Ja, von deiner Kindheit erzählen mag.
Ja,
where you went to school.
My father came from a big family, and he was the 7th child, counting down, and the 7th child counting up. How many children were there?
14. No. 13.
13. And he was the youngest.